right, so we're diving deep today into something I know a lot of you have been asking about, Bitcoin public keys.
Mhm.
We got some great resources from y'all, and we're going to try to break it all down.
Yeah, make it make sense, right?
Exactly. No jargon. What is it? What does it do, and how does it play into Bitcoin security?
For sure, for sure. And you sent over some really good stuff that dives into the whole private key, public key thing. That's like Bitcoin security in a nutshell, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's maybe start there. I saw one source use this analogy of a private key being like your super secret password, the one you keep locked down tight, and the public key is more like your bank account number, something you can share so people can send you money.
Oh yeah, I like that.
But of course, with Bitcoin, just knowing that public key doesn't give you access to the funds, that's where the private key comes in. Like only you with that private key can prove you own that Bitcoin and you can actually make transactions.
Exactly. And it's pretty wild how they work together. So you have your private key, right? But then that public key isn't just like, chosen randomly. It's actually generated from the private key. They use some serious math and cryptography to do it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And the cool thing is it's a one-way street. You can calculate the public key from the private one, but you can't go back the other way. You can't figure out the private key just from the public one.
So that sounds really important for security.
Huge. That's like Bitcoin Security 101. That's the whole idea.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, like a recipe where you can make the final dish no problem, but you can't like unbake a cake and get back all the original ingredients, right?
Haha. Perfect analogy. You can't unscramble the eggs.
Yeah.
And that's thanks to these things called cryptographic hash functions. Basically, they're designed so it's basically impossible to reverse them. Like even with all the computers in the world, you're not going to be able to crack it and figure out the private key from the public key.
Gotcha. So now I know we've been talking about public keys, but what about these Bitcoin addresses?
Right. Good question. So yeah, you have your public key, but it's this big, long string of characters, right? You don't usually share that directly when you want to, receive some Bitcoin. Instead, they do this other thing to it. It's called hashing. It's like, I guess, imagine putting the data through a blender.
Okay, so it kind of scrambles it up.
It does, yeah. You get this like fixed size output that's totally unique to the original data, but you can't really put it back together again. And that's your Bitcoin address. It's like a condensed, more manageable version of the public key, much easier to share.
So you're saying the public key is almost like an intermediary step then, like it comes from the private key and then they use it to make this Bitcoin address that I actually share with people, which makes sense for convenience. But does that, this extra step, does it add anything to security?
It does, actually, like another layer of protection. Because even if, let's say, hypothetically, someone got hold of your Bitcoin address, that wouldn't mean they automatically know your public key, let alone the all-important private key.
Makes sense.
Plus, your sources probably talked about this, lots of wallets today will generate a new Bitcoin address for every single transaction.
Oh, right. So every time you receive Bitcoin, it's like a new account number almost.
Exactly. And that's great for privacy.
Yeah.
Makes it much harder to link all your transactions together, to figure out how much Bitcoin you have. It's like using a brand new envelope every time someone sends you a letter.
So we keep coming back to this. The really big deal is protecting that private key. All the sources are really hammering that home.
For sure. I mean, it's safe to share your Bitcoin address and basically your public key too, because that's just for receiving. But that private key, that's like the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
If someone gets a hold of that, they basically have control of your Bitcoin.
So basically treat it like gold. Keep it locked up safe.
Exactly. Can't stress that enough.
Okay, so let's recap. The Bitcoin public key, it's what lets you receive Bitcoin. It's made from your private key, but with this special one-way process that keeps the private key safe. And then, just to make things easier and even more secure, they turn that public key into a shorter Bitcoin address, which is what gets shared around.
Spot on.
And I think what's really interesting is, you have all this transparency with these public keys and addresses because they're all, out there on the blockchain. But at the same time, you have this incredible secrecy with the private keys. That's really the whole foundation of how Bitcoin stays secure.
Absolutely. It's like this really clever dance between the two.
So I guess the question for all of you listening is, how does this, this public-private key system, how does it compare to traditional financial systems? It's a whole different approach, right? And really understanding the public key gives you a glimpse into just how unique it is. Thanks for listening.